Hi everybody, welcome to the Civil Engineering Today. This is the end of the year edition. We have made it just about to the end of 2017. Crazy time in the news right now. We're not really going to go into that, but for a little bit lighter thing, we're going to talk about the light and easy topic of diversity in the workplace.
Yeah.
I have with me Sara Ting today. Sara is an author and a poet and the founder of World Unity, Inc. And welcome, Sara.
Thank you for having me here, Reed.
Oh, it's a pleasure. So I met Sara not that long ago. It was actually, we met for the first time the weekend before Halloween, as we remember very well. So she put together a wonderful event that was all about diversity in the workplace, a gala for diversity, and thank you very much for putting on it. It made a huge difference. You really opened up a conversation. I don't know who's ever tried to have a conversation about diversity in the workplace while you're in the workplace and it's not an assigned seminar or something that you've got to go to. But it's not always the easiest topic to come up. So how did you come up with the whole idea of the gala and talking to companies about, inclusion and diversity?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Reed, for inviting me to be part of your
Pleasure.
program. Thank you. And thank you for your leadership and your commitment to this very, very difficult subject matter. It's really because of leaders like you, Reed, that we have come as far as we have, because as you said, this was our 21st annual Diversity and Inclusion Leadership Gala. And it's clear to us that people make up a company, and people make up the climate in a company. Not the furniture, not the desk and the chair, it's the people. So in order for there to be a feeling of inclusion in a company, it really starts with the people. There's a great quote by Albert Einstein, which I think you would really appreciate it, being an engineer. Einstein, he said, "You cannot solve a problem with the same consciousness that created it. You must stand on a higher ground." So we have this simple but very thought-provoking message that speaks to everyone's consciousness. It's timeless, it's universal, and it's inarguable. The message says, "Are you greater than the sun that shines on everyone? Black, brown, yellow, red, and white. The sun does not discriminate." So that simple message inspired the gala, inspired the vision to build a permanent landmark showcasing this simple poem. So when we bring everybody together, it's to introduce this message that allows everybody to stop and think, because it begins with a question. Are you greater than the sun that shines on everyone?
And it really does, it's a conversation starter, and I can't tell you how important sometimes on a topic like this, the conversation starters. You were telling the story about that it was hanging, I think it was hanging in a YMCA, and
Yes, actually it was the YWCA. This was over 20 years ago. At the time, I was commissioned to produce this for the YWCA because their first imperative is the elimination of racism. And so why not have a message like this hanging in their lobby? That's their imperative. So that every time someone walks into the lobby, they will be greeted with this simple poem. And what happened, unbeknownst to me, this young lady told me this story. Her initial comment to me was, "I have to tell you how this poem affected me." I said, "Okay." She said, "I hated it." And good thing, Reed, I stood still to hear the rest of the story. "You hated it." Okay. I stood still to hear the rest of the story. I didn't walk away and say, "Well, thank you for your comment." And she told me she hated it every time she walked in, this poem spoke to her. And what it did, it opened up the wounds inside of her and the experiences of being discriminated growing up in Boston as an Asian American woman. So all these feelings came flooding back to her, which she hated. And she said, it wasn't until seeing that poem over and over again that I finally realized what I had to do. She said, I realized I had to let go of the past and I had to forgive. She learned forgiveness. How profound. How do you teach forgiveness to people? Because all of us probably have some place inside of us where we are wounded, where we were treated badly. and maybe discriminated. And maybe some of us are still holding on to it. And we haven't forgiven. And she learned forgiveness just by reading this poem.
That's amazing.
It is. I mean, what do you do with that?
Right. Especially, this week there's been that spotlight reporting in the Boston Globe on, the racially divisions within Boston and just, the prejudice is underlying in Boston. And the conversations, like your poem has brought that conversation, that spotlight has brought the conversation to the foreground, and I hope people are talking. Because what you're saying is, you're saying that, when you're within, sometimes you really don't notice it. On a given day, I look at my workplace and, that there's nothing happening, that I'm feeling any kind of bias. But then again, the actual inspection crew I'm working with, it's a bunch of guys. It's 10 guys. So I'm not seeing a bigger picture. And I think that's a lot, is people don't see bigger pictures. So I know that you talk to companies all the time. How do you get them, I think a lot of people, when they hear about a diversity training, they roll their eyes before they're even going, and they're like, oh man, I already know enough about diversity. I know. But how do you start it? How do you talk to people?
I think that's a really good question, Reed, and you're absolutely correct. People probably do roll their eyes. I think the key to doing effective diversity training is, number one, your approach. Number two, the content of the material. Number three, the objectives. And critical is the facilitator, he or she, who is presenting the material. I think that in order for the material to be presented in a constructive, engaging way, the facilitator, he or she, needs to be very, very self-aware, especially aware of your own hot buttons. Because something might be said in the dialogue or in any exercise that pushes your button, and you go off on the person.
Right.
And that shuts down the whole
conversation.
the whole conversation. Or there might be this underlying tension or feeling that permeates everything you say, because you're a person who really hasn't reconciled this issue for yourself first. There's kind of like an anger, and it might be permeating everything you say. And you might not be aware of it, but the people sitting there listening kind of feels it. So to approach a company about this subject, I think what any person wants to do and achieve is you have to first help them see what's in it for them. Why should I do this? Why should I invest in this? Well, a couple of reasons. If anybody's noticing, the world has changed. It's a global marketplace.
Yep.
And if you have a widget or a service, I don't think there's any company who would say, I only want to sell my products and services to people who look like me.
Right.
So if you want to be able to sell your product or service to anybody under the sun, it means you want to make sure that you and your team and your organization is comfortable working with anybody under the sun and has a workforce that also is reflective of the clients that you want to work with. Because the people who are going to hire you, they're going to feel a little uncomfortable if they see in your workplace you have nobody of color.
Right. I mean, we do, of course. My little group is maybe all guys, but
Or even
through the office, it's
right.
pretty diverse.
Or even gender differences. I mean, there's all ways that people differ from each other. You've got the gender difference, you have the racial, the mentally and physically challenged, religious differences. So there's all these differences. And it's up to the company about how inclusive they really want to be. And to me, in my humble opinion, I think the more inclusive a company is, it will continue to grow and thrive in this ever-changing global world we live in.
I totally agree with you. You also, oh, by the way, Sarah's also an author, I said, and this is one of your books. And this is a very, look at it, it's easy reading. So everybody should read it. Everybody should get a copy. But I mean, just the title of the book is extremely, provocative title. Small book with a big idea. 5-minute training to empower you and transform our world. Pretty bold words.
It is. And you know what? I tell people, Reed, it's not a gimmick. The 5-minute exercise, I actually bumped it up because it actually could take you less than 5 minutes. It could. And when I say it's not a gimmick, just to give you an example, who's read the book? 3 medical doctors. One doctor said life-changing ideas, dynamite. Another doctor, an associate professor from Harvard Medical School. The Michigan National Guard, they ordered 200 copies. I guess you could say the most notable order, Unilever, which is a global company, they sponsored not 1,000, not 2,000, they sponsored 5,000 copies of the book.
That's a lot of copies.
And you know they didn't sponsor it because they liked the title.
Right, right.
They had to vet the book.
Yeah.
And make a decision. Gee, is this worth investing 5,000, making 5,000 copies available, sponsoring it? And they said yes.
But you can really make people in such a short thing. It's just amazing. So to give everybody an idea how easy this book is, during the dinner that I was at the end of October, the copy was on the table, and without missing anything, I sat and read the book. So it's easy reading. I'm like not that fast a reader.
And like you said, thought-provoking.
Yeah.
Do you remember the quote by Mother Teresa?
You're quizzing me.
I know. But it's a really simple but powerful quote. I mean, everybody, especially in the healthcare industry, should read this. She said, I've come to realize over the years that being unwanted is the worst disease that any human being can experience. See, I think that if everybody was exposed to that quote, we would have a little bit more compassion for one another, especially for those who experience discrimination, whether it's because of your religion, your race, your gender. We would just have a little bit more compassion versus condemning each other and saying, oh, why don't you get over it?
Right. You know, the funny thing is, it doesn't get said when you get older. When you're younger, there are things like, Thomas the Tank Engine, where the whole purpose of Thomas, he always wanted to be a useful engine. And all kids accept that and understand, that's what people want. They want to feel that others find them useful. Really clear. And that's how it is, I feel, in the real workplace. Everybody wants to feel useful.
Right.
Everybody wants to be just appreciated. And I think nothing really deeper, that's what people want out of a workday.
Exactly correct. That's how I opened up my book. At the core of all of us, we all want to have a feeling of belonging, like you said, appreciated, valued, and heard. Show me one person who wants to work in a place where they're not valued, they're not heard, and they're not appreciated for what they do.
Right. It's really the difference. It's just totally a job. Otherwise, you're just going there.
You're like a machine.
You're coming there, you're earning your money, and you're going home, and you're miserable.
Right. You're like
that work day is it's where you're, home with your family, of course, you're interacting with your family, but during that work day, it's where you want to shine. You want to feel alive.
Right. I think the other important point to bring out here, Reed, is the word diversity.
Yeah.
Because I don't think there's a common understanding among all of us. If you want to just focus on Boston or the nation, when people hear the word diversity, I do not think there's a common understanding of it. If you ask 6 people, tell me your definition of what diversity means, you get 6 different answers. I think that people tend to go right to the black and white issue, that diversity means race, that's it.
Right.
No, diversity means how are people different? Yes, race is one way they're different. People are also different by their economic status. Some people are middle income, some people extremely wealthy, and some people very poor. And the reason why I stress that is because in the article about
the Spotlight.
The Spotlight article, there was one article that talked about the lack of diversity in the Seaport District. And a lot of people's comment to it was, this article is not about racism, it's about rich and poor. This is not about diversity, it's about rich and poor. Like, excuse me, economic status is about diversity. That is part of how we are different from one another. And so I think that is part of the challenge we have right now. Not everybody has a common understanding of what diversity means. People tend to go right to black and white. That is what diversity means, black and white. And it is much, much more than just black and white.
Right. So how All right, so if you were designing something like getting into the civil engineer world for a second, if you were designing something like the seaport, let's face it, the seaport, you go back 20 years, and it was a barren wasteland of parking lots. Not even completely filled with parking lots. It was, you had Pier 4 restaurant way down there, and Jimmy's, but other than way down there, it was empty. It was nothing. So it's beautiful that so much has come out of that. And that's an area that's really transforming the city in a lot of ways. Now, I know that they consciously are working on making those parks, being inviting parks and giving common space like, like District Hall, where people can share their thoughts and hang out. And but what kind of things make a city, how do you invite diversity in the public? What's missing?
Well, it's a very good question. I really think it starts with the vision that whoever's in charge of that whole development has. Because when you talk about inclusion, back to economic status, so is this going to be a community that's going to be inclusive of people of diverse incomes? Or is it only going to be for people who make $1 million and up, or $500,000 and up? So income is a big part of inclusion. Then you ask yourself, okay, do we want this to be a place where people of diverse cultures and backgrounds feel included? If so, what are the images or art pieces that we can put out there that make people feel this is a place that is inclusive of many diverse cultures? It's something as simple as art pieces that come from different cultures.
Right. And that community artistically, that's also like the art center of Boston. And they've really worked hard at preserving the arts culture in that neighborhood. The Fort Point Art Association.
Yeah, right.
But that is, you're absolutely right. It's something really important. It's funny, we had for the Future City competition that we run. So there's kids all over the place right now that are designing their dream cities of the future. And as a kickoff, we brought in a few speakers, and one of the speakers, she was a student at Northeastern, but she's also a community activist in Boston. And she was talking about that one of her favorite things is like Washington Square in New York City, where you've got the mix of the chess and you've got the mahjong tables, and all communities are out there and mixing together and enthusiastically talking to each other. And that's the kind of thing, maybe, like, we need something like that.
Exactly.
She's hit the nail so on the head.
Exactly. Going back to the income diversity, because that really helps create a diverse community, because clearly people of diverse incomes is diverse. When you look at their racial makeup and cultural backgrounds, it will be diverse. If you say we want a community that's going to have diverse incomes, you will get diversity, guarantee you.
Right. Yeah, but at the same time, of course, it's being developed by developers that made a large investment and are looking to get a large return on the investment, but there's got to be a balance.
That's
because if you want it to sustain, we've seen things that are geared towards the super wealthy gone. Especially some of the malls that have gone up in the past history of just in the Boston area. You've seen malls with all exclusive stores come and go.
Right.
Those exclusive malls don't seem to last. But stores that bring everybody in, and stores where there's a place that you're not necessarily eating 5-star dining all the time. You can have your choice. They seem to be the ones that go on forever. Atrium Mall maybe didn't quite do as good as, say, the Arsenal Mall.
Right.
Which just has everything.
Right.
Just generally there.
Or even, I think, the Cambridge Mall
Right,
continues
the Galleria,
to do well.
right.
Yes, and you're right. The Atrium Mall, which was more exclusive, it's closed, it's shut down.
Right.
So it wasn't successful.
Yeah, I don't know the reasons, of course. I'm digging,
Right.
I have no idea why it actually shut.
Right. But, on another level, if you think about it, in my humble opinion, I don't think it's really healthy to have communities segmented by the income and like having only wealthy people living here and then the rest of the community lives where?
Right. It's funny, it goes deep into the history of the city of Boston, too. Like, you know, originally Beacon Hill was the exclusive of the exclusive, and then right next to Beacon Hill in the north end, the poorest neighborhood of the city formed. And the wealthiest of the wealthy were very eager to move out into the newly built Back Bay as soon as it did. That
Right.
became the new exclusive area. The rich neighborhoods stayed the rich neighborhoods. It's difficult. It's difficult to plan to get diversity. It takes a conscious effort when we're talking economic diversity.
Well, you're absolutely correct. It takes a conscious effort. And when you think about it, Reed, by not doing it, by not having a really diverse community, what it does, it reinforces that particular group to stick with their group, which means if you go to the workplace, there is no workplace that I know of where, well, only the rich people work in this department. In a workplace, you will have diverse groups of people.
You're right. It's everybody in the workplace, right?
So
Everybody's working together.
Yes, but if you're living in a community where you're only hanging out with the rich people, well, it reinforces the mindset of I can only relate to the rich people. And then you have to now go to the workplace, and now it's like, well, now you got to shift your mindset. But maybe you're not going to be able to do it because you're used to only working with the people or associating with people of this particular mindset. So I think I don't see it as being healthy in terms of cultivating a mindset of inclusion.
Right. It definitely does. And I think the first step is always that conversation. People need to talk, and even more to talk, they got to listen. And you're the first, you know, what's the name of your other book?
The Power of Listening in a World of Differences.
So I think you know about this topic.
Yes, the power of listening in a world of differences.
Yeah, and that's I think where we gotta go. I know that we have to wrap up the show. We've come out at the end of our time, but thank you everybody. I want to make a couple of announcements. The Future City competition, it's going great. We're on schedule. We've got some wonderful judges, including Sara, going to be on January 20th, and really looking forward to that. The Model Bridge Contest, it's not too late to join. You just have to go to www.engineeryourfuture.org and follow the contact information, and you'll get to us. And this year we're making our models. This is for grades 5 to grade 12. We supply the materials. You just got to get a teacher on board, teams of 2 or teams of 3. You're building it out of a glue gun glue with the paint paddles that you get from like Home Depot or Lowe's this year is the material. And coming up in January, I'm not sure the exact start date, but the online bridge contest will be starting. We got all kinds of good activities happening all year. I didn't even talk about Kyle and we've got a field trip coming up for you Future City folks. You get to see a real dream city, a real future city that's being built in South Weymouth. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in. And thank you, Sara, for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you next month.